What's up guys, Jake with Centsible Capital. If you've ever tried to build up your savings, you know just how difficult it can be. In fact, it's recently reported that nearly half of all Americans can't come up with $1,000 to cover an emergency. 59% of Americans are uncomfortable with their level of savings, and nearly 1 in 3 US adults have no emergency savings at all. This is a huge problem, but it's one that we can tackle together. Today, I'm going to give you 7 simple steps to save $10,000 as fast as possible so that you can get one step closer to financial freedom. All I ask in return is that you give me a quick like and subscribe. Step 1, lay the foundation. In my work as a financial advisor, I've helped people in a lot of different situations, from multimillionaires to people just trying to get started. And do you know what the very first thing I asked all of them was? Why? Maybe you want to save up for a down payment on your first house or car, or just build up your savings or retirement fund. Whatever it may be, you need to find your why and make it your central focus for this whole thing to work. Now, for some of you, this might not seem that important, but I'm telling you from years of experience, setting proper goals is like laying the foundation for everything else. It's not a step that you can skip. This why is going to serve as your North Star, so that when things get tough, and believe me, they will, you can look at it and be reminded why you started doing all this in the first place. Step 2, break it down. So you've got your why in the back of your mind, but that by itself isn't enough. $10,000 is a decent chunk of change, and for some of you, might not even sound doable. But here's the thing. I don't want you to save $10,000. I want you to save $833 a month, or $385 every 2 weeks, or even just $27.40 a day. What's the difference? Well, on paper, there really isn't one. These all add up to $10,000 in a year. But psychologically, breaking these numbers down like this makes that $10K way less intimidating and helps us understand what we'll need to do in the short term to reach that goal. $27.40 is a lot less intimidating than $10K. You could even say,
"This ain't nothing but a peanut. I can do this all day long, baby."
Now we need to take that and turn it into an actionable goal, or more specifically, a SMART goal. SMART is a framework that you can apply to create goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. If your why is to buy a new car, we could turn this into a SMART goal by saying, I want to set aside $10,000 for a down payment on a new car by saving $385 per paycheck for 26 paychecks. Say hello to your new SMART goal for me. But we're not done yet. Now you need to take this and put it where you can see it every day. Whether that's putting it on a Post-it note or your phone or laptop, you just need to make your goal visible where you can see it and be reminded of your why every single day. Step 3, you need a budget. Now that we've got the framework in place, you need a budget. To save $10,000 fast, you need to understand 2 things about your money: what you're earning and what you're spending. This amount between the two is where the magic happens, and our goal needs to be to get this gap as large as possible. This is known as your discretionary income, and is basically the amount of money you have left over each month after spending on necessities like housing and groceries. The more you can maximize your discretionary income, the quicker you'll get to that 10K goal. But the only way you'll even know how much you're working with is if you create a budget. First, you want to calculate your monthly income. Now look through your last 6 months of expenses. Organize them into categories such as rent, internet bill, groceries, and restaurants. Add up the amounts for each category and then divide by the number of months. This will give us a workable average that we can go off of. If for some reason you don't have 6 months of data to go off of, that's fine. You could always just use less or just track things for the next month or 2. An app like Rocket Money or You Need a Budget could come in handy here to help aggregate all your info in one place. So you run the numbers and you're able to see what your discretionary income actually equates to. And chances are there's probably at least one category where you're spending more money than you really expected. Carl Pearson, the progenitor of modern statistics, is quoted saying, "That which is measured improves. That which is measured and reported improves exponentially." Your personal finances are no different. And now that you've put in place an effective budget, you're going to find it way easier to save that 10K. Step 4, sacrifices. You've got your why, your SMART goal, and your budget ready to go. Now comes the hard part. Sacrifice. For the vast majority of you to save $10,000 fast, you'll have to make some changes and potentially some very tough decisions. If I were to tell you to take a look at that budget and tell me the top 3 categories that you're spending in, chances are they're housing, transportation, and food. For most people, those 3 things alone make up more than half of what they spend in a given month. And as a result, any changes that we make here are going to have the most significant impact by far. Let's run through some examples for each real quick. Housing's one of those things we don't immediately think of when we're talking about cutting back because, well, let's face it, nobody wants to feel like they're downgrading. But if you're in a high cost of living area or in a house or apartment that's bigger than what you really need, chances are you could save a decent amount by moving. Nevertheless, packing up your things and finding a cheaper place to live isn't the only way to free up a bit of extra money here. You could potentially rent out an extra room. For a lot of people, the only way they can even afford to be in certain big cities is by having roommates. Even smaller things like turning off the lights when you're not using them or being more cognizant of how you use heating and AC can add up here. Now, when it comes to transportation, overspending is ubiquitous. The July Cox Automotive Moody's Analytics New Vehicle Affordability Index listed the average monthly car payment as $756 in June of 2024. And that's not including insurance, gas, maintenance, or any other type of transportation. Look, everyone wants to have a nice car, but if you're serious about saving, you can't afford to drive something above your means. Getting a cheaper car, making an effort to take public transportation, and shopping for cheaper car insurance are incredibly effective ways to free up some extra cash. I personally make an effort to shop around for better car insurance rates every single time that my policy is expiring to ensure that I'm getting the best deal possible. And then we have food, yet another category where we have the potential to make vast improvements. You could shop at cheaper grocery stores like Aldi instead of Whole Foods. You could opt to make more meals at home instead of eating out so often. And don't even get me started on the food delivery apps. The prices on those things are ridiculous. Even little things like making a conscious effort to drink less alcohol or not going grocery shopping on an empty stomach can go a long way. When it comes to grocery shopping, I like to plan ahead exactly what I'm going to get and then place a pickup order online so that I'm not tempted to overspend. Meal prepping is also an incredible way to save money, waste less food, and eat healthier in the process. It's actually one of my personal favorite ways to rein in food spending since it provides multiple benefits and pretty much anybody can do it. So now that we've addressed the bigger spend categories for most people, let's talk about the smaller stuff. Step 4.5, marginal utility. Everyone's got their own unique spending habits. I might be willing to cut back on something that you aren't. And for this to be sustainable in the long term, it's important that we also optimize your savings around your happiness. To do that, we need to understand the microeconomic concept of marginal utility. Now, I'm going to preface this by telling you that marginal utility is a very deep and multi-layered concept that I could probably make an entire video on just by itself. But you don't need to understand every little detail to be able to apply this idea to help streamline your spending. I just want you to look at it like this. Where can I reduce my spending the most that reduces my happiness the least? Let's take streaming services, for instance. Maybe when I come home from work, I watch something on Netflix every night. Maybe I decided to sign up for Hulu and Max because they each had a show I was interested in. Chances are that getting that second and third streaming service didn't increase my happiness by the same amount as just getting the first one did. It didn't double or triple the amount of happiness points that I'm getting. Looking at it through this lens will help you do two things. Ruthlessly cut spending on the things that don't bring you happiness and spend a more reasonable amount on the things that do. To save $10,000 fast, it's not a matter of if, but which sacrifices you'll make. You need to get creative and ask yourself the important questions. Could I get the same thing for cheaper? Do I really need this much of it? Or could I just stop spending on it altogether? And once you do that, there's one last concept you need to understand before we move on to step 5. A dollar saved is worth more than a dollar earned. You see, to earn that dollar, you have to spend money getting to and from work and then pay taxes on it, leaving you with only around 70 cents or so in your pocket. Let's say that you go to the movies and spend $30. To get that $30, you'd have to actually earn something closer to $43. On the other hand, if you choose not to go, you have an extra $30 to put towards your goal. But what do you do if there aren't any extra dollars to save? Step 5, Bolster. In step 4, we were able to reduce your spending, freeing up some extra cash flow and getting you that much closer to your $10,000 in a year. But some of you are probably realizing that you're still a bit short of that daily $27.40 savings goal. After all, there's only so much spending that you can eliminate before things become unrealistic. And since we've already cut back what we can, there's only one thing left to do. Bolster your earnings. For some people, this is as straightforward as just working some extra overtime hours or asking for a raise, but for others, it'll require a bit more creativity. Now, if you're gunning for a raise, it goes without saying, but you need to prepare ahead of time. Think about things like your timing, salary trends for your role, and your recent achievements so that you can increase your chances of walking away with higher pay. And you could always consider looking elsewhere. According to a 2023 Bank of America report, in 2019 and 2020, you could score around a 10% pay increase by changing jobs. And while the job market evolves and these things do change from year to year, there's still a pretty good chance that you could be getting paid more money to do the same job just for a different company. And even if you do get a bit of a bump with one of those methods, you could consider taking on part-time work in the evenings or weekends. This could include gig work as well, things like Uber or dog sitting. Not all these jobs are created equally though, so it's really important that you make sure you're getting paid an appropriate amount for your time. But they do typically have the added bonus of being very flexible with your schedule. And if that's not your cup of tea, you could always take the more creative route and try to monetize a side hustle. This could be anything from flipping things on Craigslist to freelance web design or even math tutoring. By recognizing that you have a skill or hobby which could be monetized, you can turn something that you already enjoy doing into something that also makes you money. And you never know, it could always become a full-time business venture for you in the future. Look, creating an effective budget's great, but let's be real. If you aren't earning enough money, there's no magical budgeting methodology that's going to fix that. Budgeting and living below your means is something that everyone should strive for, but if you just aren't earning enough, your effort needs to be laser focused on just increasing your earnings potential. This could mean putting in some extra time to learn a new skill or getting a degree, whatever it may be. If you fall into this category, this is where you'll get the best bang for your buck. Step 6, automate. All right, so you've reduced your spending, you've increased your earnings, and you're ready to start stacking it up. But hold on now, there's still some important things you need to know. Consider where you're actually putting your money. A lot of people will, by default, just open up a savings account at the same place they have their checking account, which tends to be one of the big brick and mortar banks. The only problem is, these banks are going to give you their favorite interest rate, 0.01% APY. Impressive, right? But all's not lost. High-yield savings accounts, courtesy of banks like Ally and Marcus by Goldman Sachs, are currently paying between 4 and 5% APY. Using one of these over a traditional savings account can actually make a huge difference. Now, everyone's situation is different, so the right type of account is not going to be the same for every single person. But generally speaking, if saving for a shorter time horizon, a high-yield savings account is perfect since they represent one of the highest return producing FDIC-insured, fully liquid options out there. Anyway, moving on, most people look at their savings like this. They get their paycheck, pay their bills, spend most of the rest, and then maybe set aside whatever's left in savings, if there even is anything left. You need to look at things differently. Whether you have a budget in place or not, I want you to pay yourself first. The idea of paying yourself first goes hand in hand with automation. Rather than doling out leftover money in your checking account to savings and investment accounts as the last step in the chain, we want to move it all the way up to the first step and then automate it. Here's how I do it. First, before I even get paid, I've already set up my paycheck to be automatically split between my checking account and my high yield savings account. Most employers' payroll systems will allow you to automatically split your paycheck across multiple accounts, but in case they don't, you'll just need to set up an automatic transfer to move funds from your checking account into your other accounts whenever you get paid. Next, I have automatic transfer set up to move excess funds from my savings into my various investment accounts. What I have remaining in the checking account is enough to cover housing, gas, food, and all my other bills for the month that I calculated using the historical averages from our budget. Then, once the end of the month rolls around, if I do happen to have anything extra in my checking account, I'll manually allocate it across my savings and investment accounts in accordance with my goals. If you're able to set up and automate this process, you won't even have to think about setting money aside because, well, it's just being done automatically for you. Now, your checking account's going to look a bit leaner, but that's a good thing because you won't be as tempted to overspend. I really love implementing this method because you're essentially creating a sort of forced savings mechanism. Some other examples being things like Social Security or even a mortgage. Basically, financial instruments where you're forced to set money aside for some future benefit. And let's face it, it's way easier to stick to your budget if this money isn't just idling around in your checking account. Step 7, strike while the iron is hot. Last but not least, for our final step, I want you to start right now. Yeah, I know it might sound obvious, but seriously, go grab a pen, a piece of paper, whatever you need, and write down your goal now. You and I both know how easy it is to procrastinate when it comes to these things, but I'm not going to let you do that when it comes to your finances. Don't come up with excuses and say, oh, I'll just start tomorrow after I take care of a few things. The best time to jump up and take action on any goal is when the idea is fresh. It's like when you tell yourself you'll start that new workout program next week because you're just so busy today, only for Monday to roll around and what do you know? You're still busy. Weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and before you know it, all this time's passed and you still haven't made an ounce of progress towards that goal. Wanting something is not enough. Everyone wants something. Everyone wants more money. Those who actually get it are the ones that get up and act. We all know that when it comes to saving and investing, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So if you care about your financial future, and I know you do yourself a favor and strike while the iron is hot. And when you look back a year later and $10,000 richer, you'll only have one thing left to say.
Yeah, baby! Lightweight! Lightweight, baby! Yeah! Go! Go! Lightweight, yeah!